When I first heard the global governments, I imagined governments, the United Nations, and countries sitting together to solve global problems. I thought global governments was mainly about cooperation. But after this semester, my understanding changed. At the beginning of the semester, I understood power in a very traditional way. I associated power with states, military strength, economic capacity, and formal decision-making in international organizations. However, this view became too narrow for me. I began to realize that power in global governments is not only held by states. Power can also belong to multinational corporations, markets, supply chains, technology platforms, and legal rules. For me, one of the most important shifts was power is not only the ability to command, it also the ability to shape the conditions under which others must act. My theoretical understanding also changed during the semester. At first, my thinking was close to liberalism. I saw global governments as a system where institutions help states cooperate, reduce uncertainty, and solve shared problems. This view is still useful. Many global issues such as climate change, pandemics, trade, and human rights cannot be solved by one country alone. Institutions and agreements matter. But I started to ask questions. Not only do institutions help corporations, but also whose interests are built into these institutions? Who has the power to shape the rules? Who benefits from them, and who carries the costs? Week 4 was one of the moments that challenged my earlier understanding of global governments. Before this lecture, I tended to think of multinational corporations as economic actors operating in the background. But the lecture showed me that multinational corporations are also political actors in global governments. They have strong capacity to shape regulations and influence policy directions, both nationally and internationally. They can also influence public opinion through advertising campaigns. At the same time, they contribute to development through foreign direct investment, technology transfer, and management practice. But they can also negatively affect the environment and workers' rights. This made me realize that corporations do not need to have formal political authority in order to exercise power. They may not sit in the United Nations as states do, but they can still shape the rules, resources, and choice available to states and societies. Another key learning from Week 4 was the problem of accountability gaps. Multinational corporations are mobile. They can operate through complex global supply chains. This makes it difficult for nation-states to hold them accountable for human rights. A real-world case that helped me understand more deeply is Rana Plaza disaster in Bangladesh. In 2013, the Rana Plaza building collapsed near Dhaka, killing over 1,100 people. Most of them are workers and injuring many more. For me, Rana Plaza shows how global supply chains can separate economic benefit from legal responsibility. Global fashion brands can benefit from low-cost production, but when harm happens, accountability becomes fragmented across suppliers, factory owners, and international corporations. This made me realize that the problem is not only simple that there were no rules. The deeper problem is that power often moves faster than accountability. Power moves globally, but accountability often remains national. When I moved from Week 4 to Week 10, I began to see similar problems in environmental governments. Climate change is clearly a global issue. It crosses borders and affects everyone. But environmental governments show that shared problems do not automatically create equal responsibility. The 1972 Stockholm Conference placed the environment on the United Nations agenda and led to the formation for United Nations Environment Programming. However, developing countries were cautious. They feared binding environmental targets and wanted their rights to development to be recognized. This changed how I understood environmental governance is not only about protecting nature, it's also about development, inequality, and historical responsibility. Countries do not enter environmental negotiations from equal positions. Some countries have already benefited from carbon-intensive development, while others are still trying to develop under new environmental constraints. So the question is, who caused the problem, who has the resources to solve it, and who is asked to pay the cost? The Paris Agreement helped me understand both the promise and the weakness for global governments. It shows that international cooperation is possible. Many countries agree to keep global temperature rising within 1.5 to 2 degrees above per-industrial levels. But the lecture also showed that the Paris Agreement is no legally binding targets. Each country decided its own contribution, and countries largely monitor themselves. This context directly back to the weak four. In both corporate governments and environmental governments, there are many voluntary frameworks, but voluntary responsibility is not the same as enforceable accountability. By the end of the semester, my understanding of global governments had changed significantly. I no longer see power only as something held by states. I now see power in corporations, markets, rules, knowledge, and accountability gaps. My biggest takeaway is that we shouldn't only ask whether global governments can solve global problems. We should also ask who governs, whose interests are protected, who pays the cost, and who is held accountable. For me, global governance is not only about the corporations, it's also about power.